Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Viewers, after the withdrawal of USA from Afghanistan, we hear a lot of debate, discussion and talks about Afghanistan. However, unfortunately, most of the time, the real Afghanistan is missing from those talks, discussions or the debates. The reason is very simple, because most of the debates and talks, they are influenced by Western media or the Western think tank. So we can find very few people who really understand Afghanistan. On top of that, the regional country or the other countries from the world, and their experts, they try to explain Afghanistan by using the lens of their national interest. That's why Afghanistan is most of the time is missing from the debate. That's why today we have requested a real-time expert. You know him as a famous anchor and a journalist, but most importantly, he is also a real-time expert on Afghanistan, who understand Afghanistan from the point of view of culture, from the point of view of society, values, norms, and the real stakeholders of Afghanistan and their power play. So that's why today we have invited Mr. Saleem Safi.
Thank you, Shakeel Ramay.
So without wasting time, Safi Sahab, just can you explain or educate the audience about the culture and the society of Afghanistan, so they can understand in which framework we are talking about and what is the real Afghanistan?
Ramay Sahab, in short words, I can say that Afghans, they are emotional people. Some people have this misconception that the whole of the Afghan nation that consists of the conservative people, but it's not true. There is a distinction between the rural and urban Afghanistan, but as far as the urban Afghanistan is concerned, I think that is more liberal as compared to the Pakistani society. Okay. For example, during this Hamid Karzai and Ashraf Ghani government, there were about 12 music school in Kabul. But even here in Pakistan, we don't have a single music school.
Interesting.
Then most of the Pashto singer belonging to Peshawar or Quetta, their main source of earning for the last 20 years, that was the music concerts in Kabul. Mm-hmm. So they are at the same time, they are very fond of music also. Then traditionally, if we look into this a particular kind of dance that is called athan. So majority of the Afghan during their weddings and other events of enjoyment, so most of the Afghans, even some teachers and even some imams of mosques, mm-hmm. they also participate in that athan.
Okay.
But at the same time, is Afghanistan fought for the last 40 years through wars. During the British era, Afghanistan unfortunately become a sandwich or become a front line of the war of Russia and the British. Mm-hmm. Then it become the front line state or the battlefield of Soviet Union and the Western world, or we can say that the fight between communism and capitalism. So mm-hmm. Afghanistan become the field for that also. And then after 9/11, Afghanistan once again become battlefield between the war of alqaeeda and the United States and its allies. So due to that reasons, we can say that a war economy also generated in this region, particularly in Afghanistan. So in these periods, the Afghans were compelled to side with one power or to other power. And the same things happens in the last 20 years, that the Taliban were fighting against the American and the Afghan government, and the people who were living in Kabul or in Jalalabad and who were part of that political system. So under the supervision of the United States, they were fighting with the Taliban. So that's why that most of the Afghans, they not only have become fighters, but their economy is also based on war. And most of the Afghan, they are not only the sufferer of wars, but at the same time they are good fighters also.
So, Saleem Saab, if I can, you can say, if I make a quick analysis of that, there are two things which are very important for me to learn. One is Afghan society is a heterogeneous society. It is not homogeneous.
Yeah.
Second, the continuous war has created a new class of war economy. So that is also one of element. Building on that, Saleem Saab, when you are talking about they are heterogeneous and their war economy is also there. So recently when USA was withdrawing, so what do you think, why this mess was created and who is responsible for this mess that Afghanistan is going through right now?
Although, Ramesh, there are so many characters in the Afghan conflict. Soviet Union was a character. The neighboring countries, particularly Pakistan and Iran, they had their role and they still have their roles. Similarly, some countries just like India also played a role and still trying to play their role for their national interest. And the proxy war between Saudi Arab and Iran, that were also fought in Afghanistan. And unfortunately, the Afghanistan also became a battlefield for the proxy war of India and Pakistan. But for this time, particularly for the current crisis, we can say that the main responsibility lies on the shoulders of the United States. And I can say with evidence from history and from the recent past,
Please share with the audience.
that the sole responsible or the major responsible for the current crisis, that is the United States. Because after the withdrawal of Soviet Union, we all know that America was patronizing that war against Soviet Union. But after the collapse of Soviet Union, the American didn't show any kind of interest in reconciliation or reconstruction of Afghanistan. And then at that time, Pakistan was a frontline state against the war in Soviet Union. But immediately after the withdrawal of Soviet Union, the American even sanctioned Pakistan. The Pressler Amendment was promulgated against Pakistan. And then when the Taliban emerged, so in the beginning, even the American at that time, they were supporter of the Taliban because the Unicol company that was involved in the creation of Taliban, and they were thinking that they can take the contract of this pipeline between Turkmenistan and Pakistan. But when the Taliban decided that instead of Unicol, they will give this contract to the Bredos, which was an Argentinian company. So after that, the American became critical of Taliban. And after 9/11, although I don't believe on the conspiracy theory, I believe from the first day that the 9/11 was conducted by alqaeeda. But in response, Pakistan supported the United States. Then the China supported the resolution in the UN's Security Council. The same was the case with the Russia. The Russia also supported America's war against terror or war against Al-Qaeda. And interestingly, even the Iranian also supported the American. But when they captured Afghanistan, so the American didn't give any attention to the concerns or the interest of Iran, of Pakistan, of Russia, and even of China. For example, Pakistan was demanding only one thing, that we should not allow India to use the Afghan soil against Pakistan. But the American brought the Indian to Afghanistan. Similarly, at that time, the Iranian cooperated with such a level that the first attack which the American conducted in Kandahar against alqaeeda, so that were based on the Iranian intelligence information.
That is very interesting.
Yes, because immediately after 9/11, a secret meeting took place in Geneva. Zalmay Khalilzad in call under Firth from the American side was there, and the head of the Iranian special forces, Soleimani, then he was killed also by the Americans. So he was representing his country, and they were urging the American that you are getting late, so you should do quickly, you should start your action against Al-Qaeda and Taliban. But instead of stabilizing Afghanistan, after 2 or 3 years, the American went to Iraq. That was an unjustified war. And the Iranian thought that now it's become a sandwich between Iraq and Afghanistan. In both countries, the American forces was there. And besides this support from the Iranian sides, the Bush administration included Iran in the axis of evil.
The reward of sport in Afghanistan.
Yeah. So because of this behavior of the American, the neighboring countries changed their policy towards Taliban.
Okay.
And they become sympathizer of Taliban. So that double game started, and that was because of the American. Then the second biggest mistake was that from the first day, Hamid Karzai was insisting that we should make a deal with the reconcilable Taliban. But at that time, on the one side, the American bracketed Taliban with Al-Qaeda, and they didn't allow Hamid Karzai to make any reconciliation with Taliban. First, he formed a reconciliation commission under the leadership of Sabghatullah Mujaddidi, and then under the leadership of Burhanuddin Rabbani, but the American didn't allow them to make any reconciliation with Taliban. Then the policy of President Obama, that was also a mixture of contradiction. On the one side, he gave a deadline for the withdrawal of his troops. And on the other side, he make a surge in his military presence, and he sent more troops to Afghanistan. So that gave a hope to Taliban that the Americans are leaving Afghanistan.
Okay.
And then the biggest blunder which created this mess, I think that was the Qatar, the Doha negotiation, and then the Doha deal, which the Americans struck with the Taliban.
Okay, Safi Sahab, you also shared an informal discussion at the off camera that the Russians wanted to train Afghan for anti-narcotics, and USA did not allow them to go there. That was also another mistake. I think the two lessons from your discussion. Number one, the double game. USA started the double game. And we can say that actually he played the double game with the regional countries.
Yeah, I told you that what the Iran did, and in response, the American included Iran in excess of evil. What Pakistan did, how pathetically Pakistan even surrendered Mullah Abdul Salam Zaif to the American. Yes. He was the ambassador. And then Pakistan shared its all intelligence with American. Pakistan provided its bases. Pakistan provided its airspace against the Taliban. But in response, they brought the Indian to Afghanistan, and they started using Afghan soil against the Pakistani interest.
I think that is a very big thing which you are mentioning.
Then here, as far as Russia is concerned, so Russia was worried about the production of opium in Afghanistan. And last year of the Taliban's government, they brought the opium production to 0%. But under the supervision of the NATO forces, once again the opium production started. So on the one side, the American and its NATO allied, they were giving training to the whole Afghan national army, and the Russian offered that they are interested to train the anti-narcotics force of the Afghan government, and they invited only 8 officers for training to Moscow. So the American didn't allow them to go for training to Russia. And then the Zamir Kabulov, at that time he was ambassador in Afghanistan of Russia. So he gave an interview to BBC, and he warned the American that if you are doing this, so we will be compelled to stop our cooperation with you people, because on the one side you are training their whole army, and on the other side you are not allowing their only 8 anti-narcotics officers for training to Russia.
I think for the policymakers, not only for Pakistan, the regional country, you gave a very good terminology, the double game by USA, if they can learn it from here. And second, so Americans, they were confused. Their policies were contradictions. Now coming to a third and a last question.
No, they also did double game with Hamid Karzai and with Ashraf Ghani. For example, in the beginning, they didn't allow Hamid Karzai to struck any deal with Taliban.
Reconciliation.
Or to make any reconciliation with Taliban. But in Obama periods, if you remember, they started direct talks with Taliban in Qatar, Doha. But at that time, Hamid Karzai stopped that process because he was rightly had the opinion that by passing my government, if you are talking to Taliban, so then my government position will be compromised.
No legitimacy.
So that's why he sent in protest, he expelled the Qatari ambassador from Afghanistan, and he called his ambassador back. So that's why at that time, then the Americans stopped that process. And now this time, Ashraf Ghani was not happy with this whole episode of Qatar process, because without the Afghan government, when the Americans started negotiation with Taliban, so on the one side they automatically gave a legitimacy to the Taliban movement.
Yes.
Then which kind of deal they stuck with Taliban? So if you look into the the Doha agreement, so it shows that the contents of that agreement is that you are making a deal with a state,
Yes.
not a particular group. So they also played a double game, first with Hamid Karzai and then with Ashraf Ghani.
So we can say those real innovators of the double game, they are the Americans, but
Yes.
they are the smart enough, and they're using their media and think tanks to blame on Pakistan. So that's it. So
Now, even so many American authors, just like Steve Cole, if you read his book, The Ghost Wars, so there you will find that in so many things, even their own institution, they were not on same page regarding Afghanistan or Pakistan. The CIA was doing something else, the Pentagon or the military was doing something else, their political leadership was doing something else. So they were also divided
yes,
regarding their strategy.
they were confused. And the other thing they did before starting the negotiations with the Taliban and during the era of Ashraf Ghani, they tightened their economic support, and they brought to that point there where they cannot speak, because during the last few years they were not providing the required support. That's why the poverty increased in Afghanistan, food insecurity increased, unemployment increased. Now coming to the last question for this session, what do you think, how we should deal Afghanistan, and what is the most important at this point of time where world can start cooperating with Afghanistan?
Actually, one and other mistake which the American also committed, and which also Pakistan is, countries like Pakistan are also repeating, they didn't look into Afghanistan with the lenses of Afghanistan. For example, after...
That's why I was insisting you again and again for this interview.
Yeah, for example, in 80, the Americans were looking Afghanistan with the lenses of Soviet Union. And when the Soviet Union collapsed and was defeated by the Mujahideen, so the American left Afghanistan. Then now this time, when we ask the American that why you are leaving now Afghanistan without stabilizing its economy, its politics and other things. In the beginning they were claiming that we will also rebuild Afghanistan, and they were using the term of nation building. Now the Trump was openly saying that I have no interest in the reconstruction of the nation building of Afghanistan. So now when we ask them, whenever you ask any American policy maker that why you are leaving Afghanistan, so their reply is that because of China. Now we have to make focus on China. So that's why we are leaving Afghanistan. So they came to Afghanistan not for Afghanistan.
Is this not against the human rights?
Yes, I think that is against the basic human values and the human rights. First they came to Afghanistan, or they showed their interest in Afghanistan with keeping in mind the Soviet Union and the communism. Then they came to Afghanistan only when their own national interest was hit by alqaeeda. Now all the realities, all the factors which were there in Afghanistan after 9/11 or in 2001, they are there. But now they are leaving Afghanistan keeping in mind not Afghanistan but China. And similarly, Pakistan also committed this blunder, because Pakistan sometimes look into Afghanistan with the lenses of India or with the lenses of the presence of India. And the same thing India is doing in Afghanistan. For example, India is not a neighboring country of Afghanistan. So why it's taking so much interest in Afghanistan? Because India always tried to use the Afghan soil against Pakistan. So they are also not looking Afghanistan with the lenses and with the requirement of Afghanistan. For example, all the project which during the past 20 years which were executed by the Indians, so that was close to the Pakistani border. So why you are not doing these things in northern Afghanistan? So now the key of peace in the region, I think, lies in the hands of countries like China, Russia, Pakistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan and Iran.
Uzbekistan.
So my first request, because now stability and peace, I don't believe that the American will be happy with peace and stability in Afghanistan at this stage. If their target is China, so then obviously they will try to make Afghanistan once again a hub of civil war or anarchy. So that situation will obviously affect the CPEC, and that will similarly affect the other corridors in Central Asia. So the peace is in Afghanistan and stability in Afghanistan is the requirement of Pakistan, of China, even of Russia, of Iran. So my first suggestion will be that these countries should come to one forum, and they should form one strategy which accommodate the concern and the wishes or the ambitions of all neighboring countries and the regional forces. And my second submission will be that making this strategy, they all should keep in mind the ground realities of Afghanistan and the requirement of the Afghanistan. What they required? Do they require money? Do they require food,
medicine?
Do they require diplomatic support? And all of these countries should engage Taliban at this stage. But at the same time, they should also persuade Taliban that they should come towards an inclusive government, and they should come towards a system which will be acceptable to the world community, and which should also be qualified for the demands of the current era and the current period.
Okay, that's I think you put forward very good suggestions, and briefly you described the culture of society. I think this topic demands more time and more discussion. So I think for this session that is enough. And at the end I just want to say one thing which you mentioned. So Americans, they came to fight with Taliban and left the Taliban by signing an agreement. That is very unique war, where you come to fight with the enemy and you're making a deal with them. Thank you so much, Saleem Safi, for your time. And we hope we can have one more session or more specific about culture and value of Afghanistan.
Thank you.